Good morning.
Good morning.
In a new, a slightly new vista here, featuring the back of John's head, beautifully outlined in the mirror there.
Very good.
Beautiful weather here in Kent. A bit cold, but bright. And here we are, Sunday after a Saturday session, which featured a lot of great music. So we'll kick straight off with, we decided to go a bit 12-inch for the first bit, and I know at least one person has requested we show some more 12 inches, so Chris, 1427 Basket, this is for you. We kicked off actually with a remix of Earth, Wind & Fire's Can't Hide Love by Masters at Work.
So not going to be a lot to look at.
No, there's not going to be much to look at. The music's great. Yeah, I mean, Masters at Work, fantastic remixers. Louis Vega and Kenny Dope Gonzalez, who gave John a Christmas card.
Yeah.
It's pretty exciting.
Louis Vega did.
Louis Vega did, yeah. So yeah, this is a double, two sides. We've got the Shelter DJ remix of the track Fantasy, and the Masters at Work remix of Can't Hide Love, one of my favourite Earth, Wind & Fire tunes, although originally done by Creative Source.
Mm-hmm. All good.
Yeah.
Sounded great. From that, I went to something I picked up when I was in Trinidad, of all places. I don't know why I need to go to Trinidad to buy a Herbie Hancock record, but obviously sometimes it helps. And went for the nearly 10-minute version of Stars in Your Eyes, which is the track off Monster, which was one of his late 70s albums. Just a great groove. Actually.
Really fantastic.
Really highly recommend. And only available on here. I think it's on one of the kind of breaks compilation as well. I think it's on as well.
Featuring the vocals of Gavin Christopher.
Yeah, we don't know much about.
No, but who does have a solo album which I bought on the strength of that 12-inch.
Yeah.
We'll show another time. But we were staying in 12-inch territory, and this on the Prelude label is DTrain and the track Music. So DTrain most recognised for You're the One for Me. Hubert Eaves III is the guy behind DTrain. Yeah, I mean, it was this absolute moment where soul and electro music were kind of fusing. Very exciting. Sounded very fresh.
Hubert Eaves made the same kind of transition that people like Mem2 made. He was like playing kind of...
And Reggie Lucas.
Yeah, Hubert Eaves was playing with Gary Bartz in the early 70s, his keyboards. So, and then moved into dance music, really.
Yeah.
Island Records Peech Boys, with a P, who were a band led by the singer Bernard Fowler, who's now been in the Rolling Stones for quite a long time, actually. And we think that they did make an album, I think, but they were really known for two singles. One is Life is Something Special, which is the one I played, and also Don't Make Me Wait as well. Yeah. Much sampled as well and used their voices.
Especially the a cappella mixes.
The a cappella mixes of this, So anyway, bit of a classic kind of, and produced by Larry Levan. So we're talking Paradise Garage.
So we were sort of in the early 80s here. This is 1983. This is from the band Class Action, featuring Chris Wiltshire. We're Class Action. Were they a UK band? I don't know. Anyway, track called Weekend. Again, just that sort of really on the Jive record label, on the that kind of really interesting fusion of electronic beats and soulful vocals. Yeah. And disco, I guess, sort of all three coming together. And dub actually was definitely a feature on the last three tracks.
Slightly bizarrely, in my box, I happen to have the original version of Weekend. I should say I have a box with about kind of 30, 40 records I bring here. So this one was in the box by Phreek, which was a Patrick Adams, Leroy Burgess production, and this was from the late 70s. So this was actually much more disco than the other version of it as well. But another classic. Yeah, speeds up from. Tells you helpfully on the label, it speeds up from 126 to 128 BPM.
And you can hear it. So Leroy Burgess featured on that track and is also one of the main people featuring on this 12-inch, which came out on Morgan Khan's Streetwave label. This is Aleem and a track called Get Loose, which I have to say, people don't seem to play this anymore. I mean, it was a big tune back in 1984. But yeah, fantastic. Heavily sort of dubbed out.
That was 35 years ago.
It was 35 years ago, that's true. Indeed. I remember hearing this at some sort of event for people who worked for Camden Council. Back on the Euston Road in 1984. There you go.
Next up, Kleeer, the band Kleeer, KL3s, I think, didn't they have in there? And they were a band who made the transition from kind of funk into the more electro-sounding material in the 80s as well, and played the track Next Time It's For Real, which, as I was putting onto the platter, I noticed is produced by Ahmed Deodato, which is kind of interesting. More mid-tempo this one, but same got that same mixture of soulful vocals and kind of electronic.
I always used to think of Slave in the same kind of breath, a little bit as Kleeer. Yeah. And then we came a bit up to date actually. This is a 2017 repress from a track that came out I think in 2006. This is on the Groovin label, and this is Peven Everett and a track, a fantastic tune called Stuck. We listened to pretty much nearly the entire extended 11-minute 48-second edit. Released in 2006. Peven Everett, we both realised we had quite a few of records of his. I think he was around in the early 2000s. He was the voice of the Roy Davis Jr. track called Gabriel that was very big in I think the early 2000s. But yeah, I really like Peven Everett. He builds layers and layers of vocals on an amazing groove here. So Stuck, absolutely fantastic.
Sticking with this, as we haven't got much in terms of covers, we should do a little playlist with this one, I think.
Yeah.
I'll do that.
Okay.
In the comments. Keeping great voices, DAngelo. I think, for some reason, this might have been one of the first times I ever heard DAngelo. This is on the Genius Wu-Tang member single called Cold World, which came from his album Liquid Swords, and this is a mix which features a whole a cappella bit of the vocals as well. Produced by RZA, of course.
And what was the Stevie Wonder tune they were sampling?
I don't know.
Hotter Than July.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the tune.
Anyway, yeah, the last track on side 2 of Hotter Than July, beautiful tune. Okay, back to 1990 now, and this is on the Champion record label. This is a DJ promo of Chubb Rock's Treat 'Em Right, which has more than a nod to House of Pain Jump, Jump Around, but a great flow of lyrics actually, really great tune. Slightly marred by a very bad sampled keyboard sax solo towards the end.
Sample, I think it's played on the keyboard.
Played on the keyboard with a horrible sort of sax sample, but actually the groove is fantastic on this.
Quite funny as well.
Bouncy.
Something about the humour and the bounciness reminded me of Digital Underground, and this is from an EP of mostly versions of Dowutchyalike, which is just a kind of very funny kind of P-Funk inspired hip-hop track, really. They were around, and their dancer was Tupac, interestingly. He didn't actually rap with the band, but he danced behind the band. So Digital Underground also did an album called Sex Packets, which is almost completely made up of P-Funk samples as well.
Brilliant production.
Great production.
Really wide. We were listening, we had a bit of a sort of stylus issue at the beginning of the session and moved on to an Autophon Blue, which actually sounded great. It was very loud.
Yeah.
A bit of a tribute to John Singleton, who was the producer and director of Boys in the Hood, film that again came out in the early 90s, about 92 I think. And we listened to the last track on side 2, the song that closes the film, which is called Spirit, in brackets, Does Anybody Care, from the Force One network. It sort of had that sort of slightly Teddy Riley sound, didn't it? Mixed with the sounds of blackness. Great tune.
Great tune, great film, actually, very influential film. Then we had a break, clearly,
Yeah,
because we went from 12-inch singles to Frank Zappa and Hot Rats. I've just, we often do, just realised this record's 50 years old now. This Frank Zappa record, and it still sounds incredible. I mean, production-wise, it still sounds absolutely incredible. And I picked up a new version of this. I got the Bernie Grundman remaster, and any of these remasters that are coming out on vinyl, they sound absolutely fantastic. And they're also not too pricey as well. So I played It Must Be a Camel, which is the last track on Hot Rats. Hot Rats was one of the first albums issued under Zappa's name alone, and classic. I had it, basically got it when it came out, and had it ever since, really.
Also, we've mentioned these before, but the whole series of 70s George Duke albums, which have also been just reissued on MPS. And sound absolutely fantastic. This is I Love the Blues, She Heard My Cry, the jazz edition from George Duke, and we played the track called Giant Child Within Us - Ego, which featured Ruth Underwood and Bruce Fowler, who both I think run that
They're on
Rats. Or no?
No, they're not.
But
They came later, mid-70s band.
Yeah, a fantastic sort of journey into George Duke's head, and heavily influenced by his Zappa tenure, I believe.
We've had a few Patrice Rushens in sessions over the last year or so. This was from her first album called Patrice, which she when she moved from Prestige onto Elektra, and played the track Music of the Earth off here as well. Just a great keyboard player, kind of underrated, Patrice Rushen, I think. People think of her as being a singer rather than a keyboard player. But anyway, nice album, this one. All her albums are good, actually.
Yeah, and big shout out to Bobby Gardner, for those
absolutely.
who remember her from a previous video, and her vinyl community composing project. She's just been in LA hanging out with Patrice Rushen. They're going to be writing something together.
Which is very exciting.
Very exciting. This next selection became, John very often gives me an amazing compilation CD when he comes to stay, and he played, there was a track actually off this album, it wasn't the one I played, but anyway, we listened to Freddie Hubbard's Windjammer, and we listened to the title track, and this came out, it's 1976, not a great cover, I think we'd all agree, but some great music.
And overall, not a great period for Freddie, actually. Some of those Columbia records weren't good, but that one's somehow very good.
Steve Gadd and Andy Newmark on the drums.
Yeah.
Can't go wrong.
Might have shown this ages and ages ago, but this came out again. This is a singer called Ezra Mohawk, and she made two really great albums, which in the kind of early 70s, which were kind of almost in a kind of Laura Nero, Joni Mitchell kind of mode. But this third album of hers was quite unusual, really. It was almost like a kind of much more upbeat, almost kind of soul-inflected record. She was the first woman ever to join the Mothers of Invention as well, back in the late 60s. Really interesting background. There's some great interviews with her on YouTube as well, very interesting woman. Played the track God Help It off here, which is a kind of almost like her voice, she almost sounds like a kind of Betty Wright kind of, Betty Davis kind of vocal line on it. Well, very raucous. So some great playing, great drumming from Bernard Purdy and other people on here as well. Ezra Mohawk, very interesting artist.
Well, there was a connection for me with Ezra Mohawk's vocals to the vocals of Tequila, who features on this Tony Williams Lifetime album, which I picked up locally 2-3 weeks ago. The Old Bums Rush, not an album I was at all familiar with, and I think sort of came straight after the original Tony Williams Lifetime lineup with John McLaughlin and Larry Young. This time he's joined by Webster Lewis on the organ. Tequila, actually, she sings and plays guitar. And Tequila's voice, for anybody who knows the first Larry Young's Fuel album, Turn Out the Lights, she also has a very Betty Davis type voice, actually. Yeah. Kind of Herb Bushler on the bass. A pretty wild album, kind of really hard to categorise, but as ever, as you would expect, some amazing drumming from Tony Williams. Kind of, really weird to think this was only 2 or 3 years after his Miles period. Yeah, things were really
It's a
shifting.
new one to me. I need to get that one, actually. I didn't know that before. Sun Ra. Next, I can't remember what the connection was, actually, particularly. Don't know what it was. Wildness. Although this is not a very wild. This is actually possibly the least wild Sun Ra record. I mean, if Sun Ra ever made a chill out record, which he probably didn't really.
Right.
Sleeping Beauty. This used to be the rarest of all Sun Ra records, and the originals going for thousands of dollars a pop, but it was reissued by the wonderful Art Yard about several years ago now. It's a it's kind of peaceful record actually. By Sun Ra, very relaxed, some great tenor playing from the wonderful John Gilmore on here, and played the track Door of the Cosmos, which has almost got a kind of almost like a hip hop beat underneath it actually at parts. It's just a very interesting kind of track, pre-hip hop obviously. And a big shout again to Roger Coleman and his great collection of Sun Ra Sundays.
And a big shout out to Roger Coleman for actually talking about this reissue, Sun Ra and his solo orchestra, The Magic City, which was not an album that I knew, but is an amazing album. You were saying it was possibly your favourite ever Sun Ra album.
I think it's possibly my favourite Sun Ra. Fantastic new stereo pressing.
Absolutely brilliant, yeah. I mean, it's not background music, this. You've got to be very attentive, but it's incredibly complex and interesting to listen to. And while we're here, just because I've got to mention that I have... Oh, if I can actually lift this thing. This has just come out in the UK. This is the latest, probably the definitive edition of Galactic Ramble. This is a massive tome about 60s and 70s UK music. There was an earlier version which you've got, John, which is a kind of more like a paperback.
Yeah.
This is Richard Morton Jack is behind this. You can get this online. It's not cheap, but also this information is not really available anywhere else. If you're into 60s and 70s UK underground music in particular, this is the definitive reference tome.
Yeah, definitely. James Buttery, a few weeks ago, had a little bit of a session about Steve Lacey, and I've got a whole stack of Steve Lacey records, but I pulled out this record, The Door, which was recorded for a major label for Novus in the 80s, I guess. Yeah, the late 80s, and played the track Ugly Beauty, which is a Thelonious Monk tune. Lacey has a big connection with Thelonious Monk, having formed a band which played all his music without a piano in the early 60s, which is quite extraordinary. So this is his at that time regular band with Steve Potts, his wife, Irene Abbey, Jean-Jacques Avenel, and Oliver Johnson on it as well. Really good. Great. I mean, I'm a big Lacey fan, so recommend most of his stuff. But this is a good starter record actually for Lacey if you want to get involved with his stuff. The Door.
So yeah, I had a little mini haul of Blue Note since we last made a video, again from Hatter's Hall, which is a local second-hand music shop, I guess. And big shout out to Ben Costello, who I know is a big fan of McCoy Tyner. This is the real McCoy Tyner, and we listened to a beautiful tune called Search for Peace, which, just very sort of cerebral and beautiful. And this features Joe Henderson sax, Ron Carter and Elvin St. Jones on the rhythm section, and of course McCoy Tyner on the piano. And a very, very excellent Blue Note album.
Probably one of my top 5, I think, Blue Notes. Staying with Blue Note, another saxophone quartet. Kind of one of the slightly later Wayne Shorter, I think it's one of the last ones he made for the purely acoustic band from that period anyway. So Wayne Shorter with Herbie Hancock, Reggie Workman and Joe Chambers on drums, and played the track Chief Crazy Horse off that. I mean, really, all of the Wayne Shorter Blue Notes are great, actually, and they were all recorded in a ridiculously short period of time, actually, all over like 2 or 3 years. So anyway, highly recommended.
Lovely pressing.
Lovely pressing. This is actually one of those much maligned DMM pressings from the 80s, but I think they sound great.
This is another much maligned DMM pressing I'm noticing, with one of my favourite Blue Note covers, the iconic picture of Donald Byrd and we think it's a Jag.
It is definitely a Jag.
This is a new perspective. This is the album he did with an 8-piece kind of gospel ensemble, working with Duke Pearson and Coleridge Perkinson. Another appearance from Herbie Hancock on the vocals, and we listened to the Duke Pearson track called Chant.
I just realised another appearance by Herbie Hancock on the next record,
Ah.
which was Benny Maupin's album for ECM called Jewel in the Lotus, which came out, I guess, mid-70s. This is around the time when a number of the Mohandishi band put out their own records, the Eddie Henderson records, and others did as well. And this is kind of quite unusual, this one though. Herbie, it's got nearly all the Mohandishi band on it, but it's a little bit more improvised and a little bit more outside than some of the other stuff as well, and less groove orientated, I guess. But a very nice record, been reissued with a different cover, great ECM sound. Buster Williams on bass sounds particularly spectacular.
I feel it's a bit of a VC classic, actually.
It is, yeah.
This album.
Yeah.
Big shout out to Chris Cole, John Coltrane 68, for turning us on to Terry Plumerai, and this is a classic Chris Cole selection, an album that you've never heard of that you can buy really cheaply. So thank you, Chris. We always really value your musical knowledge and recommendations. Another outing from Herbie Hancock. So Terry Plumerai, an acoustic bass player, made this album in the early 70s. Also featured John Abercrombie, Michael Smith and Eric Gravatt. Of course, Eric Gravatt, who was the drummer. The connection was to do with the Weather Report's live album, Last Session. And actually some great percussion playing on this. This sort of seems to be in a zone somewhere between In a Silent Way, Weather Report, and the Mawandishi Herbie period, and very, very sort of ambient and chilled, but interesting music. And we listened to the track called Underwater.
My last track was from this album Double Rainbow by Terumasa Hino, which came out in the early 80s. Recorded again with Herbie Hancock, just in and again with Herb Bushstock. So that wasn't intended at all, actually. But it's this nice, very nice record, actually. Amazing array of musicians on it. A lot of involvement from Gil Evans as well on some of the arrangements, and played the track Cherry Hill Angel off that. Definitely worth picking up. Amazing recording as well. Really great production. He made a lot of kind of post-bop albums. And also quite a few slightly cheesy fusion albums later on, but this one seems to get it right, actually. Came out on Sony 82.
And our final selection seems to be a sort of whiz-through session. I mean, it was the normal 4 hours, but maybe when you're talking about 12 inches, there's not quite so much to say about them. Anyway, this was from the last Bob Marley album, Uprising. Both John and I agreed this wasn't our favourite Bob Marley album, but there is an absolute killer tune called Forever a Loving Jar, which I'm going to shout out to Doug in Canada, actually, because I'm sure he knows that tune. Really beautiful spiritual tune, and it just seemed to be the right tune to end the session. So I'm going to plug the All Points radio show, which I always put a link on underneath, where you can hear many of these selections and others every week, 2-hour show. And I think John and I are going to head out to Vinyl Head now.
Yeah, and I just want to give congratulations to Diana, really, for opening her record shop in Germany, the White Rabbit. There's a great YouTube little video of the shop. Looks wonderful, actually. Well done. What we should all be doing, actually. We should always open record shops.
We do need to all open record shops. I think maybe one day we probably will.
But that looks great, actually. So well done with that.
Yes. So enjoy the late spring, early summer.
If you're this part of the world.
If you're in this part of the world, indeed. We're having a very interesting time in the UK at the moment.
Interesting in inverted commas.
I'm sure we'll have a lot more to report after the European elections next time we come together.
Probably both be dressed in Union Jacks. Not likely. Bye-bye.
See you later.